Welcome to your weekly leadership principle by Coach AJ and the mentor team at Martin County PAL. Last night was a little different than our normal leadership session. Instead of leading the lesson, Coach AJ and the mentor team stepped aside and invited Ryan Zofay to spend the evening speaking directly to our kids and the parents who joined us. What followed was one of those rare conversations where the room gets quiet, the kids lean in, and the message hits deeper than a typical lesson. Ryan shared powerful insights about identity, relationships, and personal responsibility, and you could see the kids reflecting on how they see themselves and the choices they are making. And honestly, just sitting in the back of the room, it was a really heavy, incredible thing to witness.
Oh, absolutely. It really was a remarkable environment to witness firsthand. You could just, feel the intention radiating in that space.
Yeah, you really could.
Because the mentor team had clearly established this container of total emotional safety over time, and because that baseline of trust was already there, they could just completely hand the wheel over to Ryan. I mean, he didn't have to do the usual icebreaker routine.
Right. He didn't have to warm up the crowd at all.
No, he just walked in and immediately took these families right into the deep end of the pool.
Exactly. I was sitting near the back, just taking notes on my phone, and the shift in the room's energy was palpable. It was immediate. So our mission for this deep dive today is to take those raw notes and observations, because we aren't just giving you a recap or like a play-by-play of the event.
Right. Nobody just wants a summary.
No, definitely not. If you weren't in those chairs, or even if you were, we want to translate the visceral, heavy moments we witnessed into practical, everyday insights for you as a parent. We really want to bridge that gap between the profound realizations happening in that community room last night and the everyday reality of your living room tomorrow. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's do it. I think the most logical place to begin is, well, the mirror that Ryan held up to the room regarding the single most critical relationship any of those teenagers, or any of us adults for that matter, will ever build. And that is the relationship we have with ourselves. It's the foundation for literally everything else.
That brings me right to a distinct moment early in the evening. Ryan was looking directly at the kids, and he asked this deceivingly simple question. He just said, "Who do you want to be in 5 years?"
Yeah, I remember that.
And there was this 16-year-old girl sitting a few rows up, a volleyball player. She raised her hand and just confidently stated she wanted to play college sports in Nebraska.
She clearly had the vision and the dedication, you could tell.
100%. But Ryan didn't just applaud her ambition and move on to the next kid. He gently, almost surgically, started questioning her about the anxiety beneath that goal. He cornered her in the most compassionate way possible until she finally admitted that her nervousness wasn't about the sport itself. It came from worrying about what other people think. She was terrified of people forming negative opinions of her that just weren't true.
What's fascinating here is that she essentially became the voice for every teenager, and honestly, most of the parents in that room. Ryan wasn't just giving her a pep talk about sports psychology or, college recruiting.
Right. It went way deeper than volleyball.
Exactly. He was challenging her and everyone listening to recognize how rapidly we surrender our internal power to external forces. He brought up this brilliant analogy of hecklers at a volleyball game.
Oh, the hecklers.
Just people chirping insults from the bleachers. And he asked her if she actively listens to those hecklers during a crucial match.
Naturally, she said no. She tunes them out when she's playing. But I was like sitting here trying to figure out why he was pressing so hard on this specific point. Why focus on the bleachers when her goal is on the court?
Well, because the physical hecklers in the bleachers are easy to ignore. The psychological hecklers are the dangerous ones.
Wow.
The insight he was driving toward is that we allow these invisible hecklers into our minds constantly. When we watched her face change, you could see the exact second the realization hit her.
Oh, the light bulb.
Yeah. She realized she was willingly handing her self-worth over to the metaphorical stands. Ryan was demonstrating that if you don't possess a deeply secure relationship with yourself, if you don't internally know without a shadow of a doubt that you are enough, you will constantly scan the external world to validate your existence.
I want to add my own thought to that, because sitting there, it struck me how much worse this is today than when we were kids.
Oh, absolutely.
If you don't have that internal anchor, then every single social media app, every comment section, and every text thread is just a bleacher full of hecklers. We've built a world that scales the hecklers to millions.
That is an incredibly accurate parallel. The external world, especially the digital one, is a notoriously terrible place to source your self-worth because the metrics are just constantly changing.
Right. One day you're in, the next you're out.
Exactly. One day you are praised, the next you are canceled. If your identity is tied to that moving target, your nervous system is going to be in a constant state of hypervigilance.
So if the external world is such a volatile place to find our worth, why do so many of us and our kids default to it?
Yeah.
Like, where is that internal ledger actually written? Ryan mapped out a framework for the room that attempted to answer this, and it made me sit back in my chair. He broke down the behavioral patterns of relationships into 3 distinct dimensions.
Yes, the 3 dimensions of relationships. It serves as a sort of behavioral map. The first dimension he outlined is, it's all about me.
Okay.
This is pure survival mode. It's a state born entirely out of unmet needs. When a person is so starved for emotional safety, their brain cannot afford the calories to care about anyone else. It's an ego-protective state.
Yeah.
You see this in toddlers, naturally, but when you see it in a teenager or an adult, it signifies a deep, unhealed wound.
That makes sense for survival. But then he moved to the second dimension, which he called horse trading.
Right.
And he claimed that roughly 90% of people live their entire lives in this dimension. It's highly transactional. It's keeping a meticulous score. You do this for me, I do that for you.
Exactly. Keeping the ledger.
Right. And then the third dimension is your needs are my needs, where you are operating from such a place of wholeness and internal security that you can simply serve and give without maintaining a ledger. But wait, let me stop you right there, though.
Okay, sure.
Because sitting in that room, my parent brain immediately flared up. As parents, we actively teach our kids horse trading. We don't call it that, of course. We call it fairness, or we call it discipline.
Right.
I literally operate a behavioral credit score system in my house. I'll say, I bought you that phone, so you need to do your chores to earn the data plan. Or, you are respectful today, so you get extra screen time. Isn't that just basic, effective parenting? Like, how else are they supposed to learn responsibility in the real world?
It's a completely natural reaction to have, and I guarantee you aren't the only parent in the room mentally defending their chore chart.
I definitely was.
But we need to separate behavioral boundaries from emotional transactions. Here is why Ryan issued such a stark warning against living in that second dimension. When kids learn that love, attention, and their core value to the family are purely transactional scorekeeping, it breeds a quiet, chronic anxiety.
I am struggling to see the leap from a chore chart to chronic anxiety, honestly.
Wow.
Break down the psychology of that for me.
Okay, think about what happens in the brain of someone who lives in a transactional state. Their mind is constantly running background calculations, terrified of going into emotional debt.
Oh, I see.
If love is a ledger, what happens when they make a mistake? What happens when they fail a test or wreck the car or simply have a bad day? In a horse trading dimension, the transaction is voided. They believe they have lost their inherent value because they cannot provide the agreed-upon return on investment.
Ah. They are perpetually waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
If my worth is based on my output and my output drops, my parents' love drops.
Precisely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, true empowerment, which is that rare third dimension, only occurs when a person is whole. When you model transactional love, you model a highly conditional environment. Ryan was pushing the parents in that room to see that if you want your kids to operate from a place of true confidence, where they don't care about the hecklers, they have to know their worth isn't contingent on a trade. Behavioral consequences are fine. Like, if you don't clean your room, you lose your phone.
Sure.
But emotional consequences, if you don't clean your room, I'm withdrawing my affection and approval. That is the horse trading that destroys a child's internal anchor.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because the conversation naturally progressed to a very uncomfortable question. Where do kids learn these transactional rules?
Yeah.
Where do they pick up the belief that they aren't enough just as they are, or that they have to constantly hustle for their worth?
Right.
And Ryan turned the spotlight squarely away from the kids and pointed it directly at the home environment, the home as a programming center.
It was a heavy pivot, but an absolutely necessary one. He started explaining the neuroscience of early childhood development. Between the ages of 1 and 8, a child's brain operates largely in theta brainwaves.
Theta brainwaves, right?
Yes, it is essentially a hypnotic state. The nervous system is a sponge. Crucially, a child at that age does not have a developed prefrontal cortex.
Meaning they don't have a logical filter yet.
Right. They cannot rationalize. If a parent comes home slamming doors because they had a terrible day at work, a 6-year-old cannot say, oh, Dad is just stressed about his quarterly review.
Right, they just personalize it.
Exactly. The child's brain simply internalizes the lack of emotional safety and assumes, I must have done something wrong to make the environment dangerous. They absorb the emotional reality of the home as absolute, undeniable programming.
I watched the parents in the room react to this.
Yeah.
You saw heads nodding, and you saw a lot of people suddenly looking very intently down at their laps, especially when Ryan just started rattling off those casual phrases we all toss around without thinking. Big boys don't cry. Money doesn't grow on trees. I brought you into this world. I'll take you out.
Oh, yeah. We've all heard them.
Right. We say them as jokes or as expressions of passing frustration. But to a developing nervous system without a logical filter, those aren't jokes. They are absolute truths being coded directly into the hard drive.
And that brought us to arguably the most dense but powerful phrase of the entire night. Ryan said, past perceived voids create future perceived values.
That phrase landed like a ton of bricks in the room. But it is a bit academic. Let's actually break that down. Explain it like I'm 5.
Yeah.
What exactly is a perceived void, and what is a perceived value?
Okay, let's look at the vocabulary. A perceived void is an emotional hole or deficit that a child felt growing up, regardless of what the parent actually intended. It's a lack of safety, a lack of affection, or a lack of being heard. The key word is perceived. It is the child's reality.
Okay, got it.
And a perceived value is the coping mechanism or the behavioral trait the child adopts later in life to try and fill that hole.
Ryan anchored this concept with an incredibly raw story about his own childhood that made the academic theory devastatingly real. He talked about his father, who harbored his own deep struggles and regrets about not making it in professional baseball.
Right.
Because of that unresolved issue, his father would take Ryan out to the field and hit ground balls to him. But he would hit them exponentially harder to Ryan than to anyone else on the team. He would violently rip these baseballs at his own son.
And we have to look at the father's logic in that scenario. The father genuinely believed he was doing the right thing. His logic was, the world is harsh, baseball is competitive, and I am teaching my son to be strong and resilient.
But the child doesn't process the parent's logic.
Exactly. The child only processes the emotional safety of the environment. The perceived void Ryan experienced out on that dirt infield wasn't a lack of athletic training. It was a terrifying lack of unconditional love and emotional safety.
Yeah.
The lesson his nervous system absorbed was, no matter how hard I try, no matter how many bruised shins I get, I am not good enough for my dad. The future perceived value that created was a relentless, unhealthy drive to prove his worth through external success, which ultimately led to massive personal destruction later in his life before he healed.
The lesson for the parents sitting in that room is profound and honestly a little terrifying. Your conscious intentions do not override your child's emotional reality. You can intend to teach resilience, but if your home environment lacks emotional safety while you teach it, your child will build their entire future value system around surviving that void.
And it creates this massive gap between who we think we are as parents and who our children experience us to be. You could literally see the parents in the room doing the mental math.
Oh, for sure.
They were rewinding their own family dinners, their own disciplinary moments, asking themselves, what emotional void am I accidentally creating right now while I am desperately trying to teach a life lesson?
Which is what made the final segment of the session so deeply moving. The psychological theory we were discussing became a living, breathing reality right in front of us. Ryan opened the floor for questions, and a mother named Cassandra spoke up.
That took so much courage.
Just her sheer bravery to raise her hand in a room full of neighbors and peers and admit what she admitted. She confessed that she was carrying this deep, agonizing, unresolved anger toward her own father. And the true heartbreak of her confession was that she knew this unhealed anger was unconsciously bleeding into how she treated her own teenagers.
Yeah, she could see it happening.
Right. She found herself snapping at them, projecting her frustration onto them, acting in ways she desperately didn't want to act. And she felt completely trapped by her own reactions.
It was a masterclass in vulnerability from both Cassandra and Ryan. Ryan didn't give her a surface-level self-help platitude. He didn't tell her to just let it go. He actively listened, and he fiercely validated her anger. He told her not to minimize it because the trauma is real and it physically lives in her nervous system. But then he offered a metaphor that I think permanently shifted the paradigm for every adult in that space.
The hardware store.
The hardware store. He looked at Cassandra and told her that holding on to that decades-old anger, waiting for a father who was emotionally incapable of providing the love she needed to suddenly change his spots and give it to her, is like going to the hardware store looking for milk.
It is such a brilliant, profoundly simple visual.
Mm.
You can walk up and down the aisles of a Home Depot all day long, getting angrier and angrier that there's no milk.
Right.
You can scream at the store manager. You can cry in the plumbing section. You can demand that they check the back room. But they simply do not have the inventory to give you.
And the universal truth we have to extract from that exchange is about the mechanism of our own parenting. The symptom Cassandra was experiencing was her short temper with her teenagers. But the root cause wasn't the teenager's behavior.
Yeah.
The root cause was her own empty cup. It was her own unresolved void from her childhood, screaming for milk in an aisle full of hammers.
That metaphor honestly freed something up in my own brain. When you realize the store just doesn't carry milk, you stop taking the lack of milk personally. You stop thinking you are unworthy of milk, and you just realize you are in the wrong building.
Yes.
We saw firsthand that when the parents in that room acknowledged their own unhealed programming, it completely shifted how they view their own reactions. You can't possibly give your kids a third-dimension, non-transactional relationship if you were still standing in a hardware store furious about your own childhood.
Exactly, because you were operating from a massive deficit. And kids, with their incredibly sensitive emotional radar, pick up on that deficit immediately. They feel the underlying anxiety of a parent who is unhealed. They know when they are being managed rather than loved.
So what does this all mean? We promised at the top of the show to bridge the gap between that community room and your living room. We've talked about volleyball hecklers, horse trading, baseball grounders, and hardware stores.
We've covered a lot of ground.
If you are listening to this right now, maybe you're commuting to work or driving your kid to soccer practice, how do you actually apply this dense psychological framework to your family tonight?
It comes down to a very direct, somewhat uncomfortable, honest reflection. Look at your teenager's current self-image. Look at how they allow their friends, their boyfriends or girlfriends, or even how they allow you to treat them. Ryan repeated a vital rule during the night. We teach people how to treat us.
Wow.
Your immediate action step today is to evaluate the unspoken rules and the relationship dimensions you are modeling in your home. Are you unknowingly modeling horse trading? Are your kids learning that they only have value when they perform adequately for you?
And are you trusting what Ryan brilliantly called the tongue of their shoe over the tongue in their mouth?
I'm really glad you brought that phrase up. Elaborate on what he meant by that for the listeners.
It means watching their actions, the direction their shoes are pointing and walking, rather than just listening to their words. Because kids are smart. They will tell you they're fine. They will tell you they don't care what the social media hecklers think.
Oh, they know exactly what to say.
Right. But their actions, the tongue of their shoe, will always reveal their true internal programming. If they say they don't care about approval, but they change their entire personality to fit in with a new friend group, the shoe is telling the truth.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, doing this kind of inventory requires a massive amount of grace. Grace for your kids as their brains are still developing, but primarily grace for yourself. As Ryan pointed out to Cassandra, recognizing these negative patterns doesn't make you a bad parent.
No, not at all.
It makes you an aware parent. And awareness is the absolute only gateway to meaningful change.
It's doing the hard, quiet work on yourself so you can actually be the emotionally safe environment they need. You have to heal your own voids so you don't accidentally pass them down as family values.
This raises an important question, and it's a completely different angle I want to leave everyone with today. We've established that the home is the primary programming center for a child's nervous system. But if a child's home environment is full of perceived voids, if they don't find that profound emotional safety and unconditional third-dimension love with us, where do they go looking for it?
That is a fascinating point, because they don't just stop needing the milk.
Exactly. They go to secondary programming centers. Today, that means turning to the internet, to algorithms, to influencers, and to AI companions. These platforms are essentially massive global hardware stores that are more than happy to sell our kids fake transactional milk in the form of likes, views, and parasocial relationships.
Wow.
If past perceived voids dictate our future values, what if the most frustrating behavior you witnessed in your teenager this week isn't rebellion at all? Isn't rebellion at all, but simply a reflection of an unmet need you've been unknowingly modeling in your own life. If we don't do the work to heal ourselves and provide that deep internal anchor for our teens at home, we are effectively handing their self-worth over to the most volatile bleachers in human history.
That is a heavy but incredibly necessary mirror for all of us to look into. We hope this deep dive brought some of the magic and the gravity of that room into your day. Take these insights, sit with them on your commute, and take a hard, loving look at the standards you are setting in your own home. Thank you for joining us, and we will catch you next time.